Toot, friends. This is 𝗦𝗂𝗃𝗂𝗧. I'm a little extra excited and a little extra nervous. This is my first digital dialogue that I'm hosting as a fellow. I had the great fortune of being accepted earlier this year, and John and Frank have been gracious enough to offer us this slot in time for the Cybersecurity Awareness Month that is October. So that is why we are focusing on this conversation today, the intersection between cybersecurity and digital transformation, what we're seeing right now, what we're hearing, what we got going on. We have three amazing, not only experts, but I think even more important, practitioners in this space to have this conversation. As we go through this conversation today, we have about an hour. If at any point you have questions, come on board. Let's have a conversation. I have some questions for our panelists, and you can use the chat to ask your questions as we go along. I'm an extrovert, so I'm happy to just bring those into the conversation. Our panelists are prepared for you too as they come up for you. So we wanted to have this conversation, like I said, for you all, for this digital dialogue, because October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. And there's so many things that are quickly transforming, evolving because of AI. AI not only as threat, but AI as savior. And lucky for us, IDT has a new rapid research document out too, just in time to bring into this conversation. So what we're going to focus on today really are these two questions are the meat of our conversation, and then I'm going to bring in our panelists. And so the first question is focused on describing some of the most pertinent issues around the intersection of cybersecurity and digital transformation. And then the second one, we're going to focus on AI for just a hot second. Or we talk about AI so much, right? I just say AI, AI, AI. I think we could turn it into a drinking game is what I'm going to advocate for some Friday happy hour sometimes, because I think that'd be real fun. Real quick, a little bit about me, what brings me to the Institute. I am the president for the Change Architects, and we focus on building organizational change management and individual change management capacity for IT leaders, their teams, as well as solution and service providers. So we're not only working inside of IT with our friends, we're beefing up that capability for our consultants and our service providers in this area to deploy your services to make sure that it gets adopted. And the hard work that we all put in every day, we want to make sure it gets deployed and adopted across our companies. And so I'm going to introduce our speakers here in just a hot second, and they're going to share with you, just reinforce their name, how long they've been in IT, and their hot take about cybersecurity and digital transformation. And I'm going to start with my hot take on digital transformation and cybersecurity. I am not a cybersecurity expert. I am not a technology expert. I am a people and change expert. I know why humans do and do not, why they do and do not change. And as I've educated myself, as I've been listening and learning from my peers here at IDT and my many other IT circles and leaders that I work with, I'm hearing a lot around governance right now and AI. And here's what I hear when I hear all of this. What is old is new again. Because anytime there is a groundbreaking perspective or this major shift or disruption in technology, what happens is what happens with every major change. And it asks us to make sure that our foundation is set, that our business processes are shored up, our data is clean, our accounting controls are adequate, our governance is sound. That's what I'm hearing. These are age-old business problems that any business that is scalable, that is on point, that is delivering value should already have set in place. Sometimes these new technologies simply expose our weaknesses and remind us to get back to some of these foundations. So that's my hot take. What is old is new again, and the things that made us have strong businesses, strong governance, clean data, it's back and it's not going anywhere. That's what we need for the intersection of transformation and cybersecurity, because for me, again, to get this stuff fully adopted, to make sure we have secure organizations, we have to have people who know how to adopt the right cybersecurity practices and policies. And so in order to do that, we have to know why people do and don't change. That's bottom line for me. That is my worldview. That is my perspective. In terms of anytime we have a disruption, what does it take? It takes knowing how and why humans change. All right, I'm going to stop there. Now let's get into our guests. Our first guest is the one and only Christina Murillo. Is with the New York Giants. She has just had this amazingly distinguished career. She's going to tell you about her current role, how long she's been in cybersecurity, and her hot take. But I also want you all to think about, for my folks listening in, getting her books. She's got 2 books out. Zero Trust Networks, it's on its 2nd edition, and then 97 Things Every Information Security Professional Should Know. Not 98, not 96, 97. Christina, tell us more about you.
Thank you, Stephanie. So yes, Christina Murillo. I have been in IT, IT and information security almost 30 years now, which I know I look young. I am young. That. My current org, as Steph mentioned, is the New York Giants. Yes, the football team. And my hot take about cybersecurity and digital transformation is that we're not there yet. Modern tech is evolving very quickly. So things like AI help fuel our productivity, but transformation at different organizations is still moving very, very slowly. So,
yes, love it. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Next coming in is Brian Newhouse. He is another distinguished leader. Y'all, we got some powerhouses in this conversation today. Currently, he is the founder of Newhouse Ventures. He has just been out there being an advocate for AI and cybersecurity threat detection. Again, if you want to learn more about Brian, get a hold of his books. Brian, tell us about your book, and then tell us your hot take and how long you've been in this wild and wacky security world.
Well, thank you for having me. And this is my first digital dialogue, so I'm very excited to be here. My book, Apprentice to Maestro, is basically, I wrote it to tell myself and others what someone should have told me through my career. And that career is spanning over 2 decades in cyber. I've been in the CISO seat for over 20 years. Starting at a startup that turned into a publicly traded company on NASDAQ, Commvault Enterprise Data Management for 20 years. Then I shifted my role to a field CISO for 2 years, advocating the use of AI for the best AI cyber threat detection company before founding Newhouse Ventures, which firing on a couple cylinders, board advisory, publishing, like the book, cyber events, to name a few different verticals, as well as making cybersecurity affordable and available for small, medium-sized businesses. My hot take on cyber, I guess, talking about the intersection between cyber and digital transformation is trying to keep an intersection between cyber and digital transformation. The key word being velocity. Digital transformation is speeding up. The perimeter is expanding. So it's really hard to kind of maintain that intersection. If you're familiar with New Jersey, where I'm from, we have these crazy things called jug handles. You can't make a direct left. You have to make a right to make a left, which is kind of like cybersecurity, the intersection between with digital transformation. And also the shifting and expanding perimeter. We talk about identity, and Stephanie, you mentioned people, and that's big. I think the foundation's still around people and identity, especially as we go through this digital transformation journey.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. I'm going to introduce our next guest, our 4th person to sit in on this conversation, Mr. J.D. Arthur. He's from Braden Business Systems. He's here in Indianapolis with me, and the reason I mention that is we have these terrible things, Brian, I forget what you call them. We call them Michigan lefts, where you have to go right to go left. We had one here in Indianapolis, and I think it failed so bad they had to redesign it. It was terrible. Anyway, JD is with Braden Business Systems. He's our VCIO as a managed service provider. JD, tell us what's going on with you and your hot take and your tenure here in IT and security.
Yeah, so I'm JD Arthur. Steph said I'm with Braden Business Systems. Been in IT almost 25 years. I come at this with a little different perspective in the seat that I sit in now, where I'm much more focused on the SMB market instead of the enterprise market. The digital transformation initiatives are very different in the SMB market as opposed to the enterprise market for the most part. And I guess my hot take would be, especially in these smaller companies, it seems that digital transformation and cyber are at odds, and the intersection is like, let's fight. I don't think it needs to be that way. I think the intersection can work correctly. And to Steph will love this. My point, it's all about people. It's very little to do with technology and is a lot to do with people and their behaviors and the processes that you have people follow.
All right.
Mhm.
Let's get into this conversation. And Christina, I'm going to start with you. How would you describe what you're seeing as the most pertinent issues at the intersection of cybersecurity and digital transformation?
So I think one of the things I'm seeing so many things, but one of the things that I'm seeing now is kind of the proliferation of AI, and you mentioning the whole AI drinking game is is hilarious. But I think what's going on now is that a lot of organizations are, don't want to be left behind, so they're, whether they like it or not, they're having to introduce like AI tools in a hurry. Most every enterprise tool is infusing some kind of LLM technology or AI or RAG technology within their toolkit. And what's happening is that we haven't even worked on the basics, right? So a lot of organizations haven't thought about like data protection, data application. So there's, structured data. There's data everywhere, confidential data, and now you want to introduce a tool that's going to crawl all this data and potentially expose the data, right? So I think that's one of the things that I'm seeing that's kind of, hot right now, where a lot of organizations are looking to kind of backtrack a little bit, not really, because it's like the business is asking for this and we need to have this tomorrow. And we have like 30 years worth of data that is all over the place, which can, be a little bit of a problem. As a matter of fact, and I see it because I remember looking at Copilot, technology, and that technology, once you enable it, it actually crawls all of your data stores and it leverages all of the data. There's no way that you can exclude it. So if your information is already a mess and not classified, that's exactly what the tool is going to leverage. So
Yeah. And for me, that goes to, I mean, Copilot is one issue, but do your employees understand how to protect the IP of your company? Because
that's another issue.
they're just loading that stuff into ChatGPT to get through their work a little bit faster. And we've got governance issues. We've got those confidentiality issues. JD, I'm going to come over to you to kind of take the opposite end of the spectrum, to go back to that SMB part of it. How would you describe what you're seeing as the most pertinent issues at the intersection of cybersecurity and digital transformation?
Yeah, the SMB market it's a little bit different, but all of the same principles apply, right? It's not like we're talking about playing two different sports. The SMB market is just a smaller, leaner, hopefully, organization that we're dealing with. And the things that they struggle with are, why do I need to put funds towards this? What is the payoff? They're looking for something tangible. So explaining to them that it's not something that you're going to see as probably tangible at first, but what we're trying to prevent is very tangible. So that event that could happen and probably will happen at some point, that's a lot of what I spend time talking to my clients about, is like risk appetite, risk mitigation. They don't fully grasp that the business of cyber and threat actors is a $10 trillion business by some estimations. That is a staggering number, and it keeps getting larger. So that's a lot of what my role is to try to educate, is to try to bring these things, because if you don't know what you don't know, right? So They're focused on running their business. Most of them don't have IT departments. Some of them do. But it is our job to educate them on why this is necessary. And yes, you need a new widget, but if that new widget is Copilot and anyone in your organization can just type in there, how much does the owner make? Like, what is our profit? That's Copilot's going to go find it, and it's going to bring it back if you don't have your data classified and secured. And that can be a big can of worms.
Yes, it can. And I'll just hold up the entrepreneurial voice here because I'm a president of the Change Architects, small handful of employees, small handful of contractors. And the first time I was required to have cyber insurance for a contract that we had, I mean, my eyes almost got stuck in the top of my head from rolling them. Like, no offense to y'all, but it was just like, oh my gosh, one more thing that's an expense, not an investment. And as an entrepreneur, I'm always chasing the next idea, not the next insurance policy I can get.
I think the thing that we don't talk about enough though is like, or what I'm finding is that it's less about the technology. It's really about the risk, right? And like risk classification. Like, I think a lot of the conversations, if we go into a conversation talking about, oh, we need to, implement this tool, it's like an immediate fail, right? Because we're not really speaking the business language. So we need to talk about, why is this a risk? How is it, how is this a risk? What the potential downsides. Of course, we're going to be negative, mollies here, right? Like, you can make it sound nicer, but you have to be realistic. Like, this is the potential impact. This could happen. This is what it could potentially cost, right? And then you really have to step away from it and ultimately let the business decide, once you've given them the information and educated them, what they choose to do. Because they could say, you know what, JD, we're fine if Copilot has this information. Like, we're okay with that. We know, we're confident that they don't have any PII. So we're just gonna let it go. And you could be like, no, don't do this, right? I beg of you. But they could be like, well, we're okay with that risk. So it's really a balance of like the risk conversation, and how they interpret, they as in your business stakeholders, how they're interpreting risk and how you interpret risk. Because I'm noticing that there tends to be a bit of a disconnect, even from the legal perspective, right? Like, on the legal side, risk is interpreted a little bit differently. And usually it's, we're going to end up going with the risk interpretation, the legal interpretation versus the cyber, craziness interpretation,
Yes.
or a combination of both.
Yeah, that's a great point, Christina. And it's good to get the C-suite together to come up with that definition of risk and what it means to the business, from legal perspective, from finance, even in front of the board, to kind of prevent some of that infighting when something does happen. What I've seen is, risk registers aren't being used, so no one has documentation on these decisions kind of going forward, because it could rear up years afterwards, after the conversation, especially mitigating the risk. When the risk of Copilot, okay, is it documented? The business agrees here. The folks that didn't agree decided to move forward. Yeah, it's good to have that transparency up to the board and make sure that it's covered on a regular basis, in order to avoid some of that infighting. And then the JD's
That's a good
point.
one. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Because the risk register, Brian, I was going to say that one is one that's come up in past lives and present lives, and that's not always wanted, right, from a legal perspective, because it
Right,
could potentially
correct.
be discoverable, right? So that's another
Yeah.
conversation there. It's like, no, maybe not, don't write everything down. So there's a balance between that as well.
Yeah, and it also, defendable budgets has always been a big thing, is, coming back to compliance, where, why are we investing this tools? Why are we investing in this process or procedures? It really comes down to risk. And like you said, sometimes that doesn't want to be documented, because then all of a sudden it becomes defensible. And you get to hold people accountable for it, especially if you're reporting into the broader IT function, which, 80% of CISOs usually do that into the CIO. So it's always a fight for budget. But then when you get auditors on your side, that's where I think some contention gets between the CIO and the CISO. If things are documented and you have some of the business in your corner of the ring.
Man, these are some great points. Let's break down for a second. What are some of the other tensions, not just we're gonna let's have a separate conversation about tensions, how to align those between the IT leader and the security leader. But what are some of the other tensions that you all are seeing emerging with other business functions? We talked about legal. What else?
Transparency is a big one.
Mhm.
Making sure that there's alignment there. I was talking about budget, but just transparency. I mean, we were talking about the hot topic of intersections and velocity and digital transformation. Is visibility from the security organization into the decisions that are being made within the broader IT function or even within the business. So yeah, I think that's another thing between the CIO and the CISO needs to be lockstep. And reporting structure too is, outside that 20% where the CISO is not reporting to the CIO, could be reporting to the CFO or the CEO. Is how does the organization adapt to that when it's not fully aligned, even with as under the umbrella of the technology?
One of the things that I'm seeing is shadow IT, right? Shadow IT continues to be a thing, right? And that's it's so I feel like it's been the case for many years, and we're still there, right? So you have maybe business units that need activity tools, maybe onboarding a vendor is going to take too long, so they sign up using their own credit cards. Maybe you're not really blocking it at firewall level, so you're allowing this, them to access this URL, and now they're using these potentially SaaS tools that you have no insight or visibility into, right? I mean, you do technically, but you're not really doing anything about it because there may be some conflict there, right? So it's, how do we get back to like the centralized approach where maybe the velocity or the time to onboard a tool from business to the technology team is shorter, right? So that business units or business heads of business units don't have to go and do it themselves, right? Like just purchase it themselves and start using it. How do we educate business units to say, hey, like we're here to make your life easier, and if we can provision it for you, it's more secure, and we can set up SSO, kind of all the like bells and whistles, and how it's going to be a benefit. But I think that there's still contention there. It's the fight between productivity, efficiency, speed, and the speed in which IT potentially onboards. And because of that, we will continue to have shadow IT.
Oh, absolutely. That it was with a leadership group, an IT leadership group, about a year and a half ago, and they had that same concern where they were basically their security department was being brought the piece of technology the day before the business needed it because IT was seen as a hindrance, and that speaks to IT and IS. Are you seen as business partners? Do you know how to move at the speed of business? Do you know how to not only look at technology from your criteria list, but their criteria list so that you're brought in at the front of that decision making, not the day before they want to enter their credit card information.
Right.
Yeah, we see that a lot in the SMB market because people wear so many hats
Yeah.
that they're doing multiple roles. And it leads to them kind of like the security piece, especially out of sight, out of mind. Like I need to do this right now, and I have a deadline, and then they will come to Braden and say, I need this tomorrow. And then when we step in and we say, okay, have you done any due diligence here? Have you looked into this vendor? Has there been any security? They kind of give you the why would we even think about that? And then you kind of have to be Debbie Downer and say, because you could be opening yourself up to a multitude of risks that you're not aware of. What do they do with your data? What data are you putting in here? It's a lot easier to design or roll something out securely than it is to try and go back after the cat's out of the bag and try and secure it. Not only is it painful, it costs a lot more, which is how you get that's how you get the attention of the business owner, is to say, this is much easier to design and roll out in a secure manner. Yes, it might take a little bit longer.
On the front end.
Yeah, but to go back and secure it after the fact, you're in for a very painful, expensive experience.
Yes. My gosh, friends, that happens in every business process, every project. The lack of proactivity costs at least
Yes.
3 times more on the back end. Like a universal truth.
I think something we're also missing is like user experience, right? Like a lot of times we see, posts about UX and UI, and I think we don't necessarily consider that within security. I think we just think it is what it is. We're not considering like the life cycle, like what is a user's experience? Like why is this more cumbersome, right? Like something as simple as mobile authentication. If you're asking folks to authenticate 18 times a day, like they're gonna eventually either bypass the control or just like, yeah, without even considering that it could be another, another person trying to authenticate as them. So I think considering that makes all the difference because to JD's point, adding things after the fact is super painful because it changes like the life cycle, it changes the user experience. But if we're kind of shifting left and doing this at the beginning of every process or every implementation, I think it's a little bit easier to add something in the back end without changing the user experience. I always like to think about Apple's like ecosystem because they do a lot of things, right in terms of that. It's like very transparent and the focus is on kind of like the user's experience. So everything else in the back end is like kind of hidden, right? I'm not saying they're perfect. I'm just saying like I think about that when I think of great end-to-end user experience where it's not painful to deploy like turn a knob later. And I don't think in security we do a good job at that. I don't even think we consider it.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, I found it was great to align with procurement. So you hear about credit card use by the end user, some of the user experience after the fact. It is aligning with finance, specifically procurement, those who are actually doing the expenses, to say, hey, this is a new technology being brought in, or just generally procurement, arming them with the tools and the knowledge on doing SSO up front. Some of the things that cyber would do after the fact, or if they were being engaged after the fact, or even later in the process, is try to get, shift left. So we talk about a lot of shift left in procurement for cyber. Make sure that it's right up front. Whether it's third, fourth party risk management. If the approval's done for like a new SaaS or a new outsourced process. But I found a lot of success with aligning with procurement.
And I think even adding to that,
yeah,
I was just going to say, Stephanie, sorry, to your earlier point about the people, I think I had a lot of success aligning with people, right? So like not making it about security, making it more about, my interest in what they are doing and how I can make their lives easier. Like, hey, did you know that you don't have to have username and passwords, right? I can help you with that. I can help you consolidate. So I think that has worked for me greatly, cultivating these relationships over lunch, over tea, over coffee, like within the business day and getting to know people. That continues to be like a not so secret method, right? Which I'm very transparent about. Like it's about building the relationships, and I think that way you get to things quicker.
yes. Which is also the true in every change management initiative. That internal influence, that ability to build relationships, build trust, build influence, have other people's backs is what greases the wheels for more and more and more of what is your priority. They're getting themselves on board with your priorities the same as you're getting yourself on board with theirs to create win-wins. I know saying win-wins is kind of cliche, but I still think it's incredible. What other let's go down this alignment conversation just a little bit further and not just talk about conflict. What are other alignments that security needs to create, connections, relationships that help you all or I guess help your companies have stronger security postures?
Do you mean like internal alignment or like external alignment?
Yeah, let's go internal and then let's talk external too.
That's a good one.
I could think of internal alignment is all the verticals of the business. I found success in having steering committees both business, non-technical, and then technical, depending on, whether you're talking MarTech stack for marketing or you're just talking to the CMO in general.
Yep.
We talked about alignment with legal, alignment with finance from a procurement perspective. So I think they all have something to do with cyber in any of their business, even sales. And sales has always been that one kind of to the side. But Christina, you were talking about user experience. User experience within sales is usually one of the biggest impacts. And they're the ones that are generating revenue. So always kind of tiptoeing around their user experience to making sure it's as transparent as possible. Cybersecurity driving transparency is a big thing. You don't want to log in a couple different times. You don't want agents popping up, taking up resources, slowing down machines from a patching perspective or even a scan. But yeah, so alignment with all those resources to make sure, hey, we're going to be making this change. So change management, transparency within the business, using a steering committee to say, hey, what are your focus and what are your business objectives, trying to tie into that as early as possible, but also the changes from within cyber to make sure there's no finger pointing at the end if it does disrupt the business in any way.
Yes. Cool. JD, I want to hear from you. What do you need to have?
I think to follow up on Brian's point, when you give people input and ask validation and seek to get them on board, they have a voice. They don't feel like they're having something pushed on them, which is the way I think that security is viewed by a lot of organizations and can even be internally. Like, why are you making me do this thing? Right? Like, it feels like they just come in and say, and I'm guilty of where it's just like, nope, you got to do it. Like, take for instance, like security training, right? People, they resist it. They don't like it. You're in violation of your cyber insurance policy immediately if people aren't doing it. So one of the things that I've seen work at multiple SMBs, if I can get the ownership on board, is to gamify it, right? So, the first 2 or 3 people or however big the org is to get their, quarterly training done and to pass all of your fish tests gets, I don't know, $100 Amazon gift card or something like that, right? Like, you think, well, what would that do? I've seen it make wholesale changes across an organization because people want to win. They don't care that it's, even it's a $50 gift card. They don't care. They want to win it. They want to have bragging rights with the people around the office. Well, unknowingly, you're changing the psychology of how it's viewed internally, or in my case, working with outside the entire company of an external client of mine. You can make those shifts in something very seemingly small way like that. I've also seen it used in the opposite way where there are severe repercussions one way or another. The gamifying works a lot better.
Yeah. Well, and what you're doing there psychologically is you're attaching positive reinforcement to security when so much security is about fear and having it hidden from most of the workforce. Brian's advocating for transparency, and JD, your psychological little trick here is let's apply positive reinforcement versus negative reinforcement. You're changing the conversation around security then.
I think one of the things that I try to do, though, I try to remove the conversation like, oh, you're protecting the business, right? I tried to make it more personal. So, when there was the recent like the credit breach or some breach where everybody's social security is like all over the place.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Like I shared with kind of my colleagues, hey, this is what you can do, right? Like these are like 3 tips that you can do for your personal digital security. So I try to infuse a lot of that. Hey, like regardless of your threat model, which they don't care that stuff, like here's how you can protect your credit report, right? Like this is something tangible that you can do. So what I'm trying to do there is I'm trying to be helpful first and foremost, but I'm also trying to position myself as some like a resource that they can also ask questions to about their personal security, right? Because I think that's another way that you can build trust. If I'm always talking about how do we protect the company's data? How do we protect the org's data? Yeah, that's important. What does that mean? Does that matter to me? If I'm an end user, why should I care? You guys figure it out, right? How does this apply to me? How does this apply to my life? So I try to like, I wanted to resonate, and I say, you know, hey, like if you leave your door unlocked, right? Like, would you leave your door unlocked at night when you go to bed? Probably not, right? So I try to use like analogies and stories and give practical advice that would help the end user in their personal life. Also reinforce like, this is why you should click on, you know, these weird emails that come through, even if they're offering you a $25 gift card, whether you're accessing this in Gmail or via your business, you know, mailbox. So that's one of the things that I love, because we can't always make it about the company. Yeah.
That's right. Well, and that's mission critical, y'all. #1 podcast station. We used to say radio station, but it's 2024 now. So podcast channel is with them. What's in it for me? That's the #1 podcast channel everyone is listening to all of the time. And again, your ability to put that story in their perspective changes the game, helps them to connect with it. So real quick for our friends listening in, if you let's hear your tips. You know, what would you add to this? How do you create alignment and with whom? Put that in chat so it can pop up so we can all see your advice too. We need your tips for alignment. We're already 40 minutes in. Because y'all, when we were planning this, we're like, the conversation is gonna go so fast, but because it's also 2024, we have to talk about AI and digital transformation and cybersecurity. So I want to highlight a few things for us for this conversation and for our listeners. Again, IDT and SIM just co-released a new research study around AI and cybersecurity. So I encourage you to download that if you can and check it out. It's got some really good high-level data about what, like, the perspective on AI and cybersecurity. Here are a couple pieces that I want to pull out for us today for this conversation, and then we'll continue digging in. So excuse me, IDT and SIM asked the respondents, how much do you trust AI systems to effectively manage cybersecurity threats and protect sensitive data? 65% of respondents said they somewhat trust or kind of trust. 30% of respondents said somewhat or don't trust AI. And then 5% said they do not trust AI at all, which I thought was fascinating. Second question, how confident are you in AI's ability to make accurate and timely decisions when detecting and responding to cybersecurity threats or incidents? Sorry. The breakdown was very similar as the previous question, actually. 64% of respondents are either somewhat or kind of confident in AI's ability to make accurate and timely decisions. 32% are not confident or in the not confident spectrum of AI's ability to make accurate and timely decisions. For my three experts here, what are some of your initial reactions to those the responses there? Surprising, not surprising? Where would you put yourself?
Not surprising.
I don't think they're surprising really at all. You're gonna have people that have a healthy mistrust of everything, and so at a certain point, from my perspective, I kind of like it. There is something healthy about not just blindly trusting anything, and that's what we're trying to train people to do, is think about things critically and not just say, oh, well, I hear about AI, it's great, I'm going to go use AI. We're going to do, even in the technology space, right, with other CIOs, CISOs, like there's big divides in how people view that. So I would have expected something pretty similar to what the results were.
Yeah, I would talk a little bit about context. Context about, you have generative AI, which is content creation. But AI is really a broad umbrella term for, machine learning and neural networks. So when you talk about the applicability of AI in cybersecurity, especially the use of defenders, there's a lot of benefits for not just threat detection and response at speed and volume, but also the way it frees up the resources, security operations, that's less eyes on glass, freed up to more allowing them to work with the business. We talk about a lot about alignment. Then when your cybersecurity experts are tied up, just playing whack-a-mole with the threat of the day or the vulnerability du jour, it's really hard from a resource perspective and also burnout. So AI can provide a little bit of uplift on freeing up those resources to focus more on the business alignment, training, awareness, and just building the overall culture. Content creation, trust within that. Large language models, they know how to a great wine pairing for what you're making for dinner, or they can write a code snippet. So it depends on context of the trust. I probably would go with a wine pairing and be skeptic about some of the code that it's generating, but it's becoming very efficient, very good. So talk about prompt engineering, it really depends on context of and how those numbers that you mentioned reflect that is context.
Yeah, I would say it would be more like trust but verify, right? That's how I kind of look at it. I think a lot of the output is fantastic depending on your prompting skills, or prompting ability, and depending on the model that you're leveraging. But I think some of it is also garbage, right? And as we like to say in technology, if garbage in, garbage out. If these, content that's being pulled in, or the sources, basically the entire internet, well, we know that that across the internet there's awesome content, there's mediocre content, and there's like pure trash, right? So I think it's a matter of you kind of like playing around with it and verifying. I think that we're on the cybersecurity side, I think to this point, a lot of benefits. I think we're not necessarily 100% there. As in, I don't think we can trust blindly. I think you still need some kind of validation, some human validation to ensure that is this a correct IFC? Is it really, is this a real incident, or is it raising a valid concern, right? Because I'm noticing a lot of like false positives, and I'm also noticing that people are just like blindly saying, yeah, well, the tool gave me this and must be correct. That's not necessarily the case much of the time. So while it's a balancing act, right? Like I feel like there's a lot of potential. I think we're working towards it, and we're not 100% there. But I think we're slowly crawling to that point, right? And ultimately, I think that the technology may replace entire SOC teams, right? I mean, I think that's probably the goal, but I just don't think we're there right now.
Yeah.
And I don't know that there's a world where I ever fully trust AI without a human SOC team behind it, right? Like you need it for the speed, because you are fighting an enemy who is now using AI and weaponizing it. You can't fight that with humans. They can't process that fast, but also you are going to get those false positives and other things that might slip through that still require the human intervention. And the human, the AI is not sentient, so you need someone who can use the critical thinking and rationale and thought that AI is not capable of.
For now, right? For now, but I think
That's a whole lot more conversation.
We're moving towards not needing, right? Especially when you're given a budget and it's like, oh, well, what's going to cost me less, right? Like using the technology or hiring 10 humans for this team. I think we're there today, but I think in a few more years we'll have to make very strategic decisions. Based on budget. I mean, I don't see cybersecurity increasing, right? As a matter of fact, I see them trending kind of downwards. So that brings up, like you said, another can of worms.
Yeah. I'm just
and another 30 minutes.
I was like, we need to do this in October 2025, and we'll have a look back and a look forward for everything that's progressed. I had the good fortune of having audience with one of the top level GRC people at Lilly, which is Eli Lilly, is one of the major companies here in Indianapolis and around the globe. But one of their top leaders was giving a presentation, and her focus was on governance issues right now. She just really feels like we have so much groundwork to be laid around governance. We have about 15 minutes left. I want to make sure that we leave time for questions too. But how would what are the top 3 governance and data kind of hygiene needs that you all are seeing must be addressed, must be met for the organizations you're working with right now?
I mentioned it earlier.
I would, so go ahead, Christy.
Oh, no, sorry, Brian. I was going to say data protection, which is what I mentioned earlier. I think we're seeing that folks are just dumping whatever, right? We don't want that. Also, understanding the use cases. Like, again, we don't want to just dump everything in there, or for you to query everything. We have to understand and kind of roll it out slowly. But I'm seeing a lot of talk about like securing prompts, or having kind of governance controls around prompts, to avoid like prompt injection. And I'm also seeing a lot of reading and talking about, with other CISOs about the ability to control or to validate the output, right? So a few things, like how do we secure the output? How do we ensure that the output is valid, right? How do we secure the data, the sources, and how do we secure the prompts once they've already been used? Like, how do we secure that data? If it's not like an enterprise version of, let's say, OpenAI, right? Or GPT. So that's some of the conversation I'm seeing around that. But I think there's that, we'll need like another 2 hours for that, because there's a lot of chatter around just like AI security and what that means for defenders and how folks are tackling it. The gates have been opened, and I think a lot of security folks are struggling with how to protect it.
Nice.
Yeah, I was going to talk a little bit about SEC regulations, especially publicly traded companies or financial institutions. It seems to be a moving target with SEC with additional oversight. And also, reporting cyber incidents. And it's really around materiality, which a lot of people have trouble establishing materiality, and also practicing on what you need to do after the incident. It's good to have, to comply with that, but are you practice? Is your team practice? Is everybody where, you have your catcher and your pitcher, but is your left fielder or right fielder on board, which could be finance, could be communications, making sure that, post incident, you can handle some of those things. So I think it's around kind of controlling the narrative, is making sure you say, here is what material to my business, make sure you put it out prior to the incident. So you can control the narrative at that point. If an incident happens, says, no, we agreed as a business, we put out a public statement in a filing saying this is what material to the business, because you don't see a lot of those in the regulations. There's a lot of interpretation that has to go on the back end. So it's beneficial for organizations to do the interpretation up front. I sit on the advisory board of Redpoint Cyber, and they have a managed GRC offering. And that's what they work a lot with their clients, is around coming up with what's materiality, because it's the nuances within the regulation that really you need to address.
Nice.
So what I see a lot in the SMB market, specifically around data governance, data classification, is deer in the headlights, because they don't know where to start. They don't know where their data's at, where it's being stored, where it isn't being stored. We can help them with that to a certain degree, but a lot of that is internal to that organization. Of, we can help try and lead you down a path, but you're going to have to open all these doors and look in them and see it. You might not see something that you want to see, but you got to know. Because to Brian's point, a lot of in the MSP industry that I'm in, we refer to what he was talking about of right a boom. So there's left a boom, is how do I, to the best of my ability, secure this environment so there isn't an event. We know you could give someone the largest budget that was ever created. You can't prevent it 100%. Plan for right of boom for when it happens. That's where the rubber meets the road. That's where things really go down. If you know where your important data is at, who needs to do what when an event happens, and more importantly, you have practiced that in a tabletop, a red team, whatever you want to call it, your organization will be much more resilient and in a much better spot for when it happens. And that right of boom can put people out of business in my world. If you don't have a solid plan and your plan is like, I go in and talk to people, let's put cyber insurance and compliance and all that aside. What are your plans for your business? And then you hear them say, well, I'm going to call you. And I say, well, that's great. First step, maybe. Maybe let's plan a little bit more than that. Let's have a full incident response plan, business continuity, disaster recovery, but not just have it. If you're just checking a box, it doesn't do anyone any good. You got to test it.
That's right. That's right. And we saw the same thing happen during the pandemic when everyone had to go home. Well, you guys know what I'm saying. Virtually everyone had to go home over the weekend. The make or break were those companies that tested their plan, tested their VPNs, tested their work from home scenarios. They could stand it up on Monday. The other ones had lots of exact same concept. My friends, we're almost at the top of the hour. Thank you for this amazing conversation. I'm going to leave a little bit of space if we've got our audience members who have questions. Now's your time. Tap them up. Tap them up there so we can get them up on the board. I invite everyone to connect with our amazing panelists, get to know them. This is a little self-promotional, but what JD just mentioned, Braden and I and another group, we're actually doing a live incident response planning, but it's in Indianapolis. We're not offering virtual. So I don't think it's super helpful for this group, but we are doing that workshop for our SMB executives because it's needed, because the right of boom is kind of inevitable, unfortunately. But let's do one last round from our panelists. What's your biggest insight or takeaway from the conversation that we've had together today?
I would say the biggest takeaway is we still have a lot of work to do collectively in the information security space. But how do you enact large changes and do it effectively? My school of thought has always been a whole bunch of little changes. It's a whole bunch of little things. The most important being the humans, the users, your staff, their view of security is going to make the biggest difference. It's not firewalls and MDRs and it's the people who are your weakest link always and always will be. Teaching them to be vigilant and to understand why they're being taught these things, from my perspective, is by far the most important thing you can do.
I'd challenge that and say that your people are actually your strongest link, because whether within the organization or outside of the organization, right? I think if we change the narrative, it will be just way more, not easier, but it'll simplify the heartache and the headaches a little bit. But I also think externally, I think one of the things that what my takeaway is to continue to connect with other folks in the industry like Brian and JD and organizations like SIM, and other organizations, because I feel like we're all in the thick of it. We can bounce ideas off of each other. We can share our perspectives. And it's nice to know that I'm not struggling. Some days, some days are hard, some days are fantastic, but it's just good to have that extension, like these networks of folks that are also in the thick of it and we're kind of going through the same challenges. So this is why I say I think the people are your greatest asset, not only within your organization, but outside like relationships. I think they can make or break you from a career and a personal perspective as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'll second that as far as the communities that are out there. There's that saying, the answer is in the room, which one community uses quite often. And I came to those communities a little too late. You know, I was struggling for over a decade as a CISO, just kind of felt alone. And till I became part of those circles and social groups, I knew there was others going through it. The answers were there. And I want to high five Christina, the way she was making cyber personal, not just a business problem, is, you know, like office hours, being able to speak with cybersecurity experts on their personal needs, you know, whether it be a breach or something that they got in the mail that the business is not aware of, that you're available to help. So yeah, the answer is in the room and making cyber more personal.
Well, my friends, Brian, Christina, JD, thank you so much for your time, your investment, sharing your insights. I have learned from you all, and facilitating conversations is kind of my jam, connecting with people. But just to double down on what Brian has said, like, none of us does this work alone. Like, none of us. It's all through these relationships. It's all through these connections. And I would encourage all of our participants too. You know, I've sat in on numerous IT and AI specific conversations, panels, presentations this year, trying to get myself up to speed. And Christina, I know you said at the beginning, people feel like they're urgently trying to implement stuff. Everyone feels like they're trying to catch up with something. Know that you are exactly where you're supposed to be as an organization in your AI, in your security journey. Like, the race is more perception than reality at this point. We're all trying to figure it out. So if you feel like you're behind, you're probably not. The conversations I hear is everyone feels behind. Everyone feels like they don't know enough. Everyone feels like this. That's where our vendor partners come in. That's where our SIM peer groups come in. You know, our knowledge from IDT, learning together. That's where these groups come in. But I would say this urgency. Yes, like the cybersecurity issues coming at us are more sophisticated than ever. They're evolving more quickly than ever. That feels very urgent, but you feeling behind the 8 ball in terms of implementation, you're probably right where your peers are because everyone feels behind. Everyone feels like they're trying to race to catch up. It's perception. We're all trying to figure it out together. So don't hesitate. I would encourage folks, you know, demonstrate vulnerability and say, hey, yo, like we're trying to figure this out. Here's where we're at, because chances are more people than you think are where you're at as well. So I got 12:58. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to our participants. Look forward to continuing this conversation, certainly on LinkedIn. I know that John and Frank and the fine folks at IDT can get us a copy of the study that I referenced, and please connect with all of us on LinkedIn. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for joining Digital Dialogue. Look for more episodes at noon Eastern Time on the first and third Tuesday of every month. Can't join the live session? You can watch the replay anytime on our YouTube channel.